Hey guys, so we're going to be talking about, Bio 245. We're going to be talking about the repro stuff, and we're going to split it into a video for a female and a video for the male model. So hopefully I'll make shorter videos that you guys don't have to suffer through as much. And I guess these are going to be the last videos, so we're all really sad, I'm sure. Okay, so this is how you should orient your female. Okay, and yes, this is a female, and we'll talk about how to recognize female versus male. And we have a couple different models to show you, so I'll be taking out a couple models and pointing at the same kinds of structures and just basically making sure that you know all the models as you should. Okay, so first off, we have something called the mons pubis. So what you really need to do here is kind of orient yourself not only up and down, but front to back. So the cool thing is that we've already covered some digestive stuff, right? So here's the rectum and the anal canal and then the anus, right? So this is going to be the back end. And you can even see the top, or I guess part of the rectum coming on down, right? So that makes it a little bit easier. And so this would be the back, therefore this is the front. So the mons pubis is going to be basically a pad of fat that covers the pubic bone of your pelvis. And basically what you're seeing here at the front, see this like big white oval that almost looks like the lens of the eye or something like that? This is the cartilage that's between the two halves of your pubic bones for the pelvic bones, or the coxal bones, right? So the pubic symphysis, and you guys might recall that that's a major place where you find fibrocartilage. And you might remember me mentioning that this fibrocartilage here can actually be influenced by hormones to soften so that the pelvis becomes more flexible to allow for childbirth, blah, 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 right? Anyway, so here's our pubic symphysis. Here's the pad of fat on top of that pubic symphysis. This is your mons pubis, okay? All right. Oh, yeah, and we already put pubic symphysis on the list. So there you go. Excellent. So pubic symphysis, and so the pad of fat on top of it is the mons pubis. I didn't realize we added that term. Next, we have the labia majus and the labia minus, and you might also hear it referred to as labia, or the labia majoris, or the labia major, or the labia minoris, or the minor. So whatever you use, as long as you're consistent, right? But basically, labia always means lip, right? So for the females, they have basically, I guess if you're reading like novels or something, these southern lips, right? But you have an external set and you have an internal set. I killed Anna. So basically, here's our, there we go. There's our female from the front, right? Okay. So if you put our two halves, let's actually do that. Let's put two halves of the female together so you can actually kind of see. So again, here's the rectum coming down, and so here's the front of our female, so the mons pubis, that pad of fat that covers the pubic symphysis. And if you turn this female over, you'll see that we have the external lips, those are going to be the labia majora or the labia majus, and then you have this inner set here, that's going to be your labia minus or your labia minora, however you want to say. And looking at it from the side, which is generally how we're going to show you, you can actually see right here, that's going to be the labia majora, and right here, that's going to be the labia minora. And I'm sorry, that majus and minus. Okay, so minus, majus. Okay. Next, we have the vestibule. So the vestibule is, again, you're going to need to have two halves of your female to put together. There we go. And again, we're looking at the mons pubis, and then we're looking at the labia. So here, basically, the vestibule is going to be from the top of all this like external stuff here. So I don't think we have this term. No. So typically all your external stuff is going to be referred to as the vulva. That's not a term on your list. But anyway, so from the top of your vulva to the bottom of your vulva, it kind of makes this like diamond shape here. So that is going to be the vestibule. This whole external shell-like looking thing is going to be the vestibule. Okay. All right. So let's go back to our half view. So again, this is still the front. This is still the back. So next we have the clitoris. Now the clitoris is going to be on this particular model, this guy right here, and it kind of looks like on this model like a blue jelly bean, and it has this blue material that has holes in it. That's because the clitoris is actually filled with this material that can become erect. It fills with blood and it becomes rigid. So That's why it has this material with holes in it. It looks more porous, and you'll see the same thing when we look at the male too. But there it is, kind of looks like a blue jelly bean just underneath the pubic symphysis. Now if you look at this other model here, it looks really different, but it's the same location. So again, here is our pubic symphysis. That is the cartilage that's in the middle of the two halves of the pelvis. Our mons pubis, the fatty pad on top of that pubic symphysis. So like I said on the last model, underneath the pubic symphysis you saw that blue jelly bean. That's going to be the clitoris. In this case, this like weird pink teardrop that I'm pointing to right here, again, still underneath that pubic symphysis, that's the clitoris on this model. Lastly, we do have this model. It's not as pretty of a model, but it still is one that we could use. So again, here is your, sorry, it's the other way now, but here's your pubic symphysis, and just beneath your pubic symphysis, this like weird pink looking thing, like a boomerang, that is going to be the clitoris there, okay? Okay, moving on. We have some of the more internal structures. So first off, we have vagina, and a lot of people consider the vagina to be the external structures, but that's not correct. The vagina is actually an internal tube. So just to orient you, I'm going to also point out some urinary structures which aren't covered on this part of the list. But anyway, so we have our pubic symphysis, right? The clitoris just underneath it. Behind the pubic symphysis, this is our bladder. And you can see it has those kind of ridges on the inside, and if you look at pictures of the bladder and they show the inside of it, that it does often have these ridges called rugae. And then here's the urethra coming down, okay? So for our female model, this is what the urethra looks like out into the world. Behind that, so keep working backwards, you see another tube. The tube itself, this is the vagina, okay? So that is the passageway basically up to the repro stuff. And whenever you think about these models and try to figure out basically what's going on, the whole point of these models, well, not just the models, but the systems in general, female and male, is you want to get gametes from point A to point B. And when we're talking about trying to get gametes around, we're talking about sperm and egg. Egg isn't going to go anywhere. Egg is pretty stationary. It goes a very short distance. Really, the guys who are doing the footwork are going to be the sperm, right? So we need to get the sperm from point A, so from the male, to point B, that being somewhere in the female, right? So in this case, this is that first point of passage, right? This tube referred to as the vagina. Now, at the top of the vagina here, you can see that there's this cup shape. That's going to be the cervix. And you might recall the cervical region, that being the neck, right? So the cervical region is the neck. So kind of the same idea here. This is the neck, basically, of all this stuff, all this repro stuff for the females. So the cervix is this cup shape. It's kind of the neck. Moving up from the cervix, we have this big pillowy looking thing. But this is going to be the uterus. So this is a half view of the uterus. And you can see it has lots of this thick tissue. It's pretty useful if you want to talk about trying to implant an egg or an embryo on the surface of this, and it can supply that embryo as it develops. But anyway, so that's kind of your half view. You can stick your female ends or halves together again, and you can see here's the front, our mons pubis, right? So here is our uterus from the outside. It's just this round pink guy. On this particular model, just to show you since I already covered this stuff, we have the pubic symphysis, we have the bladder, urethra, and then behind it we have the vagina, we have the cervix, and then this round big opening, that there is the uterus, which is kind of weird. And then here's that outside view of the uterus. They have it like a bright, startling red. And here, on this one, still looks the same pretty much, but pubic symphysis, clitoris, urethra, bladder. Here's the vagina, here's the cervix, here is the uterus. And it, oops, sorry, half of that was off the screen. So let me show you one more time. Pubic symphysis, clitoris, urethra, bladder, vagina, cervix, uterus. And then if you look from the front here, there you can see the nice round shape of the outside of the uterus. Okay, moving on, we have some of the other structures that you need to know, and we're almost done with the female. So we have the uterine tubes, the ovaries, and the fimbriae, and these are all tightly linked together, and they're kind of difficult to show on some of these models. So I'm going to show you first with these guys linked together because it gives you a more three-dimensional idea of what's going on here. So we have the uterus in whole, and you can see that it actually has these little like arms coming off of it, almost like it's like, so flexing for life, right? So here, coming off the uterus, is going to be the uterine tube. You might also read this being referred to as the fallopian tubes, but here it is coming right off of it, and you can see that they're continuous with one another. So you can't really see it so well from the half view, obviously, but you can turn it over and you can see that tube coming off. So I could totally throw out a half model, in other words, and test you on that uterine tube. Now, I want to show you one other thing before I show you the fimbriae, the ovary. So you guys are familiar that the ovary is going to be the gland that's going to be producing our ovum, or our eggs, right? So in this case, on this model, this yellow lumpy part here, that is going to be the ovary, and it's kind of shaped like an egg too, but there you go. And on this model here, just to kind of show you, there is again the outside of the uterus there, and you can see coming off of it this number 265, if you can see that number right there, that's going to be the uterine tube or the fallopian tube. And you can also see, you kind of have to turn it around, but again, there's our yellow lumpy egg shape there, that's going to be the ovary. And lastly, we can see it on this model as well. So there we have our startling red uterus on the outside. You can see its little arm coming off here, and it's leading up to this, again, a lumpy yellow egg shape, and that's going to be our ovary. Now, for the ovary, that's where the egg is being released from. So that's where it's developing, that's where it's going to be released from ultimately. And the way that's kind of released is that rather than just like passively going from the ovary into the tube, it kind of bursts out of the gland. And what happens is that on the end of our uterine tube, we kind of have a little catcher mitt to catch the egg. And it looks like these little fingers, and they actually kind of wave like this to create a current to direct the egg into this structure so it can continue on down the tube. So, looking at this here, just to show you, there again is our yellow lumpy egg, so that's our ovary. You can see it has this red, almost like a red wig or something on top, these little finger-like projections. That there is your fimbriae. That's those finger-like projections that wiggle and create a current to direct the egg down the tube, just like that, down the uterine tube, and then eventually to the uterus. Okay. And just to show you on another model, just so you can see them all, again, there's your ovary. There's the little red wig or the red hat, that's going to be your fimbriae, and it's the fimbriae are going to direct that egg down the uterine tube, and ultimately, you can turn this over so you can actually see that red structure from the side, ultimately down the uterine tube and to the uterus. Okay, and one more. It's still the same thing, but just so you can see, there's our yellow ovary. It has this kind of red wig or hat, and that's going to be the fimbriae, and then that fimbriae will help direct the egg down the uterine tube into the uterus. This is really important because, like I said, the whole name of the game with repro is just getting gametes from point A to point B, and the ones doing the footwork are the sperm. So they need to be able to get to the egg, and the egg needs to at least meet them halfway, right? So they go down the uterine tube, and typically the sperm and egg will meet in the uterine tube, and from there form an embryo which can tumble its happy way down towards the uterus, hopefully implant into the uterus, and then develop into a fetus. Life is great if you're the repro system. Okay, so that's that concludes the female, and we're going to come back and talk about the male.